There's a reason why some of the most powerful, magnetic women you've ever met seem to have a quiet confidence about them, like they're walking through the world with something you can't quite put your finger on. That's not an accident. It's because they understand a fundamental truth: most people overlook your emotional world as sacred. And if you hand that sacred space over too easily, you dilute not only your power, but also the depth of the connection itself. One of the most important things a woman should always keep private, or at least deeply protected, is the blueprint of her emotional world. I'm not talking about becoming cold or distant. I'm not saying you should never share your feelings or open up. Vulnerability has its place and real intimacy requires it. But there's a difference between being emotionally available and being emotionally exposed. One is strength. The other is surrendering the core of your power before it's earned. Think about it this way: your emotions are the language of your inner life. They reveal how you see yourself, what you fear, what you crave, and what you're still healing from. If you put all of that on the table too quickly, you hand someone a roadmap to your triggers, your patterns, even your weaknesses. And not everyone who receives that map will use it with care. Some people, consciously or not, will use it to control the dynamic, to manipulate, or simply to lose respect for what once felt mysterious and magnetic. Mystery is not about playing games. It's about understanding that not every part of you belongs in the public domain. When you share every thought, every anxiety, every doubt the moment you feel it, you rob yourself of the opportunity to process those emotions on your own. And you place an emotional burden on the relationship that it hasn't earned the strength to carry. There's deep psychology behind this. We bond most deeply with people we perceive as both knowable and unknowable. People who share enough of themselves for us to feel safe, but who also maintain a depth that invites curiosity and respect. If you're an open book from the first page, there's nothing left to discover. And when there's nothing to discover, desire and admiration begin to fade. It's not manipulation, it's human nature. So what does this look like in practice? It means you learn to be discerning with your emotional disclosures. Instead of venting every fear, you reflect on it first. Instead of handing over the raw, unfiltered version of your inner dialogue, you choose the parts that build understanding without eroding your boundaries. Instead of needing someone else to hold space for every emotion you feel, you become the first person who knows how to hold space for yourself. Men, and people in general, are drawn to women who have emotional depth but also emotional sovereignty. A woman who can articulate her feelings but doesn't need someone else to fix them. A woman who can be vulnerable but also self-contained. That balance commands respect because it shows strength. It says, I know who I am, I understand my inner world, and I choose how and when to let you into it. And here's the truth: when you guard your emotional blueprint wisely, you actually create more intimacy, not less. Because what you do share carries weight. It's deliberate, it's meaningful, and it invites the other person to rise to the level of trust you're extending. They don't just see your emotions, they earn the right to witness them. And that makes the connection stronger, deeper, and far more real. Never forget, your emotional world is the most private kingdom you will ever rule. Guard it with wisdom, share it with discernment, because the moment you stop giving everyone the key, you begin to step into your true power. One of the most misunderstood forms of power in any relationship is the power of quiet boundaries. We often think that strength comes from declaring what we will and won't tolerate, from laying it all out on the table so no one dares cross the line. But the truth is, the strongest boundaries are rarely spoken. They're lived. They're communicated not through words, but through consistent action. And this is why a woman should always keep her deepest boundaries and non-negotiables close to her chest, not as a secret, but as a standard that reveals itself naturally over time. Here's the reality: the moment you announce every line you've drawn, you invite someone to test them. It's a fundamental part of human psychology. Tell someone, I'll never tolerate being disrespected, and a part of them becomes curious, consciously or subconsciously, about where that line actually is. But when your actions consistently show that disrespect is met with distance, not debate, the message is louder than any words could ever be. This is why the most powerful women in relationships don't lecture about their standards. They embody them. They don't explain why they value respect, loyalty, or effort. They demonstrate those values in the way they live, the way they treat themselves, and the way they respond when those values are challenged. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. And alignment commands respect in a way that explanations never will. There's also a deeper psychological reason this matters: people trust what they observe more than what they're told. You can tell a man your boundaries all day long, but if your actions don't reinforce them, they lose meaning. If you say you won't tolerate inconsistency, but continue to entertain someone who shows up when it's convenient, your words become noise. But when you quietly step back the moment inconsistency appears, no anger, no drama, just decisive self-respect, the lesson is learned instantly. You don't need to argue your worth when you're already living it. Another key reason to keep your non-negotiables private is that they evolve with your growth. When you broadcast them too early, you lock yourself into a static identity, and people will hold you to those words even as you outgrow them. But when you keep them internal, refining them as you grow, you allow your boundaries to mature with you. They remain flexible where they should be, firm where they must be, and deeply rooted in your current truth rather than your past self. And make no mistake, silence here is not weakness, it's strategy. It's understanding that power doesn't always need to announce itself. Think of a queen. She doesn't explain the rules of her kingdom to every visitor. The structure, the order, the standard. It's all understood by how she moves, how she operates, how she expects the space around her to function. Your personal boundaries should work the same way. They should be so integrated into your behavior that no one ever doubts what you stand for, even if you've never said a word about it. The beauty of this approach is that it builds natural respect. When someone sees you walking away from what doesn't align without hostility or justification, they understand that your self-worth is not up for negotiation. When they realize that your love, your time, your energy are privileges earned through mutual respect, not entitlements handed out freely, they show up differently. They rise to the standard you live by, not the speech you gave. And that is the ultimate goal, to build relationships where respect isn't requested. It's inevitable. Because the way you move, the way you respond, the way you choose yourself again and again teaches people exactly how to treat you. So keep your deepest boundaries private. Let them speak for themselves through how you live, not how you lecture. Because the woman who enforces her standards through silent action doesn't just attract respect, she becomes the standard. One of the most overlooked forms of strength a woman can possess is the ability to keep her long-term strategy, her plans, her ambitions, her next moves private. And I'm not just talking about money or career goals. I'm talking about the full picture, your vision for yourself, the evolution you're planning, the steps you're taking behind the scenes to become more of who you're meant to be. Those things should never be fully revealed too soon, especially not to a man, because the moment you put every card on the table, you give away the very leverage that drives your growth. There's a deep psychological reason for this. Human beings are wired to react to what they know. When someone sees your full plan laid out in front of them, they can influence it, intentionally or not. They might try to shape it, slow it down, or even shrink it to make it more comfortable for them. And sometimes they don't even do this maliciously. It's just human nature. When people know your direction, they project their fears, their doubts, their limitations onto it. And if you're not careful, those projections can start to shape your reality. But when your moves are made quietly, when you operate with intention instead of explanation, you protect your dreams from being diluted by external voices. You allow them to grow in the privacy and safety they need before they're ready to face the world. Think about how nature works. The seed doesn't sprout on the surface. It develops roots in darkness first. Your strategy is no different. It needs to take shape in silence before it can flourish in the light. Another reason this matters is because revelation creates expectation. The moment you tell someone about your plans, they unconsciously start watching to see if you follow through. And if you stumble, as we all do, that expectation can turn into judgment, pressure, or even ridicule. But when you keep your moves to yourself, you free yourself from that unnecessary weight. You're no longer building to prove anything. You're building because it's who you are. That's when growth becomes unstoppable. When it's fueled by internal conviction, not external validation. It also comes down to energy. Every time you talk about a plan, you release some of the energy that was fueling it. Psychologists call this the social reality effect, the idea that talking about goals can trick your brain into feeling like you've already accomplished them, reducing your motivation to actually do the work. That's why the people who make the biggest leaps in life are often the quiet ones. They're too busy executing to explain. And here's something most people never think about. Mystery isn't just attractive in relationships, it's respected. A woman who doesn't announce every move signals that she trusts herself. She's not seeking approval, she's not looking for permission. She's grounded enough to walk her path without needing someone else to understand every step of it. And that creates a dynamic shift. Because when someone doesn't know everything about your plan, they have no choice but to watch and wonder. And that wonder is powerful. It builds intrigue, it commands respect. So keep your long-term strategy sacred. Speak in outcomes, not in blueprints. Share progress, not play-by-plays. Let the results reveal themselves instead of narrating every step before it happens. Because when you move like that, you're no longer predictable, and predictable is rarely powerful. The truth is, your life is your masterpiece, and masterpieces aren't sketched out in public. They're created in silence, refined in solitude, and revealed only when they're ready to be seen. One of the most powerful choices a woman can make is to protect the full story of her past, not by denying it, not by being ashamed of it, but by understanding that it is hers to hold, to learn from, and to share only in the ways that strengthen her present. Too often we're told that intimacy means radical transparency, that love requires full disclosure, that to build trust you have to reveal everything. But the truth is, revealing everything isn't intimacy, it's exposure. And exposure without discernment can destroy respect, shift dynamics, and even rewrite how someone sees you before they've had the chance to truly know who you are today. Here's the thing about your past, it's not a confession that needs to be made. It's a curriculum you've already completed. You've learned, you've grown, you've evolved. And that evolution is what matters now. When you share every detail of what came before, especially too early or too completely, you invite someone to relate to the old version of you instead of the woman you've become. And once that lens is set, it can be hard to shift. There's also a deeper psychological layer here. Human beings form perceptions based on narratives. If you hand someone a detailed and filtered story of your past, they will build a version of you in their mind rooted in that story. And no matter how much you've changed, a part of them will always look at you through that lens. They'll associate you with those experiences, those mistakes, those wounds. And sometimes, not even maliciously, they'll respond to that version of you instead of the person standing in front of them right now. That's why discernment matters. You're not hiding anything. You're choosing to be defined by your present, not your past. And let's be honest, not everyone has earned the right to hold your story. Your history is sacred. It contains your scars, your healing, your deepest lessons. It's the soil from which your strength grew. That doesn't mean it should be hidden forever. But it does mean it should be shared with intention. You share lessons, not luggage. You share what is necessary for understanding, not every detail that satisfies curiosity. Because once you give someone access to your past, you can't control how they use it. They might hold it with compassion, or they might weaponize it in moments of conflict. They might understand it, or they might misunderstand it and treat you differently because of it. There's another important layer here, and it's about power. When you over-explain your past, you unconsciously seek validation for it. You want someone to say, I understand, or it's okay. But you don't need their permission to have lived the life you lived. You are allowed to have chapters that no one else reads. In fact, that self-contained strength. The knowledge that you carry your past without needing anyone to approve of it is deeply magnetic. It signals that you have healed enough to move forward without dragging yesterday into today. Remember, true connection doesn't require full disclosure. It requires authenticity. And authenticity is not about telling everything. It's about telling the truth that matters now. A man doesn't need to know every detail of your heartbreak, every mistake you made, or every lesson you learned the hard way. What he does need to see is the wisdom, the strength, and the growth that came from it. That's the part that builds trust. That's the part that builds respect. So protect your past, share the wisdom, not the wounds. Speak from the power of who you are now, not the pain of who you once were. Because when you do that, you teach people to meet you where you stand today, not where you've been.